commander of C Company, 1st Battalion, 12th Cavalry Regiment. The very same company involved in the battle at LZ Hereford. So he wasn't there, but you're going to have some connections. You're going to be able to put some things together. You're going to hear some backfill. And he eventually retired and became a writer, and he produced a bunch of documentaries, and he made a series of leadership videos for the military. So the military hired him to make leadership videos. Some of those were hosted by Lee Marvin, which is pretty cool. But he wrote this article, and this article is called Last Stand at LZ Hereford. Soldiers shield themselves as best they can from the dirt and debris stirred up by a Huey squeezing into tight one-ship landing zone around noon. The pilot touches down and 2 officers jump from the helicopter and land in a large mud puddle. One GI chuckles, pokes his buddy, and laughs quietly at the officers in fresh jungle fatigues stamping the mud off their polished boots. A dirty, unshaven captain greets them wearing torn jungle fatigues and mud-covered boots, toting an M16. So there's Warren. So now we're starting to get a little better picture. You've got the stereotypical sort of officers rolling in with their brand new fatigues and polished boots, and out comes Warren, who's been out in the jungle now for a while on this operation. The trio moves to the edge of the landing zone where towering elephant grass offers a bit of protection from the early afternoon sun. The major unfolds a map and the 3 begin discussing a mission. Within minutes, there is strong disagreement over the plan. Lieutenant Colonel Rutland Beard, commander of the 1st Battalion, 12th Cavalry, 1st Cavalry Division, and his operations officer, Major William Roll, are insisting that Captain Don Warren, Charlie Company commander, leave his 20-man mortar platoon alone on landing zone Hereford to provide fire support to Warren's company as it moves down the steep precipice toward the valley below. Warren is equally insistent on keeping at least 1 rifle squad behind to provide security. Sir, my mortar platoon is down to half strength because of malaria and has only M16s and a couple M79s. If I leave behind a rifle squad, they will have at least 1 machine gun for security. Beard tells Warren that the mortar platoon will be on the hill for less than an hour before it will be lifted out and taken to another LZ. Warren's eyes lock on Beard's. Anything can happen in hours, sir. Irritated at Warren's near insubordination, Beard warns, Captain, if you don't do as I order, you will be in more trouble than you can imagine. Is that understood? Warren hesitates a moment before answering tersely, yes, Colonel, will that be all, sir? Beard indicates yes, and Warren spins on his heels and walks over to his rifle platoon leaders to pass the orders. Beard takes a sideward glance at Roll, shakes his head, and returns to his helicopter. So automatically we see where this is going. And by the way, look, I love this book. The squad leader makes a difference, but the squad leader's getting put in a bad situation right now. Yeah. Warren has every reason for concern about the safety of his understrength mortar platoon. Hereford's topography makes it nearly impossible for even a fully armed rifle company to defend it from a determined enemy. It is a small saddle, 165 yards long by 45 yards wide, that's partially encircled by tall elephant grass. Beyond the elephant grass is completely surrounded by rugged, unforgiving landscape, the most hostile being the steep Razorback ridgeline reaching northeast toward a towering mountain nearly 1,000 feet high. At the base of the ridge, Hereford's northern boundary begins to slope gently downhill. Continues on explaining what we already know. Hereford is also the center of fierce fighting that began 7 days earlier on May 15th. So now they give a little background to this whole Operation Crazy Horse. When word of that battle filtered down to 1st Cavalry leaders, they then decided the next day to conduct a major operation in the area. And that's what they're doing. Sitting on the edge of his foxhole on LZ Hereford, Staff Sergeant Robert Kirby watches as Captain Warren leads 3 platoons from his rifle company off the mountain and down a steep slope in search of the enemy. When the last man disappears over the rim, Kirby checks his watch. It's 1:40 p.m. In less than 45 minutes, his mortar platoon is to be airlifted off Hereford to LZ Savoy, where it will continue providing fire support for Charlie Company. Tasked to occupy a company-sized defensive perimeter with only 19 men. So now we're talking company-sized perimeter. That's 150 people.
Yeah.
And he's got 19 guys. Kirby figured the best way to do this was to form a U-shaped defense and place 2 men into every third foxhole. This, however, left the top of the horseshoe open. Knowing his men are spread too thin, Kirby, a 29-year-old native of South Los Angeles, scans the perimeter from his foxhole at the bend of the horseshoe, beginning with the gun crew directly behind him. Inside the pit is Sergeant Charles Gaines and Spec 4 Austin Drummond, a former Golden Gloves champion. With fast hands, perfect for dropping rounds into a mortar tube, Sergeant Isaac Johnson sits on the ground nearby with a plot board on his lap. The gun crew is ready to place supporting fire when and where the company commander needs it. Most of the mortar platoon have been together since Fort Benning, Georgia, but a few are replacements who have never been in battle, so Kirby has no idea how they will react under fire. One of his new men is Spec 4 David Crocker, a 21-year-old medic who sits a few feet from Kirby reading a paperback, his medical bag ready at his side. In the foxhole next to Kirby is longtime radio operator Spec 4 John Spranza, who is the platoon's link to the outside world and is never more than an arm's length away from Kirby. Communications are unreliable because of the high mountains and deep valley. How's the commo? Asks Kirby. So far, so good, answers Spranza, but who knows for how long. Kirby focuses on the western section of the perimeter. Holding down the most forward position at the top of the open horseshoe are 2 men who have fought bravely in previous firefights. Privates Lonnie Sleepy Williams, whose deep sleep often resulted in heavy snoring, and Clarence Gomer Brame, a good-natured hillbilly who looked and acted like TV's Gomer Pyle. 2 empty fighting positions below them are combat vets Robert Radar Roeder and PFC Harold Mack Jr. In a fierce firefight a few months before, Kirby had been wounded and pinned down when 18-year-old Roeder, ignoring heavy fire, ran out and pulled him to safety. Mack and Roeder have been close friends ever since airborne school. So we didn't know that about Kirby, that Kirby's been in combat. He's been wounded, and he's still out there doing his job. This guy has combat experience. And now we're to think that he's just going to be lackadaisical in this scenario. In the last defensive position on the western side, Kirby assigned a competent and respected leader, Sergeant Lewis Buckley, with PFC Henry Benton, who joined the platoon only 2 weeks ago. Kirby knows little about Benton, and the 2 new privates covering the southern sector a few yards away from Kirby's position, Joel Tamayo and James Francis Brooks Jr., both of whom joined the platoon just a few weeks earlier. So he's got those guys that he doesn't really know too well, kind of close at hand. Kirby decides to walk the eastern side of the perimeter. But before he goes, he tells Buckley to collect and stack water cans, food containers, and other equipment in preparation for the helicopter pickup. "Roger that, Sarge," says Buckley as he springs into action. As Kirby walks away, he hears Spranza take the first call for reconnaissance fire in advance of the company's movement in the valley below. So why is Kirby walking the perimeter? Because he's doing his job as a leader. And he's also prepping to leave, because when the helicopters come in, is it that the good time to stack up stuff and get it off the DZ or the LZ? No, you want to have it prepped so the helicopters don't spend a bunch of time there, and you want to get all the stuff off the LZ so the enemy can't use it. Sitting in the nearest position to Kirby's on the eastern sector is Spec 4 AV Spikes, who is complaining about something to PFC Wade Taste. "Spikes, stop bitching and keep your eyes open," warns Kirby as he approaches. Spikes, 26, a 7-year veteran whose disregard for authority is well known, looks at Kirby but says nothing. Kirby orders 18-year-old Taste to help Buckley, who's already picking up scattering cans and containers. So he's telling, stop bitching and keep your eyes open. This is what a platoon sergeant should be doing. Kirby moves to the next position, where Look magazine correspondent Sam Caston is interviewing Spec 4 Daniel Post and PFC Robert Benjamin. Caston came out of the field a day before to write a story about death. He had chosen to stay on Hereford with a mortar platoon rather than travel with the company. Post, known as Platoon's practical joker, feeds Caston mischievous responses, while Benjamin only responds in yes or no answers. Kirby queries the two troopers on what they will do if attacked. They tell him they plan on throwing hand grenades down the rocky precipice below their position and firing interlocking fires with the positions on their left and right. So that's Kirby. Kirby's like, okay, what are you going to do if we get hit? They say we're going to throw grenades over there, and we're going to got interlocking fields of fire with these other positions. Satisfied, Kirby heads for the most forward position at the top of the eastern sector, manned by Paul Harrison and Charles Stuckey, both battle-tested specialists. Harrison and Stuckey have established interlocking fields of fire across the open end of the U-sheet perimeter with Williams and Brame on the western side. So he set the positions. He went out, inspected the positions, make sure people understand their field of fire. Squad leader's actually doing his job. On the way back to his position, Kirby nods to Sergeant First Class Edward Shepard, sitting on the rim of the foxhole not far apart from the mortar pit. Shepard, 38, is the only soldier there who's not in the mortar platoon. He stayed behind to catch a helicopter where he is to appear before a promotion board. Kirby sits on the edge of the foxhole and watches Speranza talking on the radio with Captain Warren, who's calling correction on where to place another mortar round. Speranza yells back correction to the gun crew, and it then fires a few more rounds. Shortly after 2 p.m., Warren radios Speranza that the helicopters are on the way, and that word spreads from hole to hole. What Warren does not know is that the helicopters are actually delayed and still sitting on the ground at LZ Savoy in the valley. Around 2:15, 5 minutes before the anticipated arrival of the helicopter, Stuckey spots 3 well-camouflaged North Vietnamese army soldiers watching him from the elephant grass. He opens fire with his M16 and Harrison joins in. The 3 enemy drop either dead or wounded. So, if you don't catch well-camouflaged NVA if you're not paying attention. These guys are paying attention. Then in the next instant, a massive volume of automatic fire and small arms fire is unleashed from the high ground to the north and a ravine to the east. Shepard, sitting on the rim of the foxhole, is killed in the first volley. Within seconds, the rocket-propelled grenades, mortar rounds explode near each occupied position. Men burrow deep inside their foxhole under the terrifying shrapnel slicing through the air and bullets cracking overhead. The platoon is surrounded, outmanned, and outgunned. Kirby yells to Speranza to radio Warren and tell him they are under attack and need immediate air and artillery support. A stunned Warren immediately calls battalion for fire support and orders his company to turn around and head back up the hill. So, to your point earlier, Warren, the reason he was able to turn around and head and go is because he didn't even want to leave in the first place. In the open, stacking equipment, Taste falls to the ground with 2 bullets to the throat. Buckley, his shoulder covered in blood, dashes across the open perimeter, screaming, get off the hill, and disappears into the elephant grass. Harrison yells for Stuckey to go to the mortar pit while he stays behind to hold off the enemy. Stuckey takes a few more shots at the enemy, turns and zigzags for the mortar pit when an RPG round explodes in front of him, throwing him to the ground. After the shrapnel and dirt stop falling, he raises his head and looks to see where Post and Benjamin had been trying to make an escape. Both are dead. He sprints towards a large rock right just outside the perimeter. As he turns the corner of it, he encounters an enemy soldier about to throw a grenade into the LZ. Spotting Stuckey, the NVA tosses the grenade directly at him instead. The grenade sails over Stuckey's head, hits the rock behind him, and explodes, wounding him. Managing to stay on his feet, Stuckey fires 3 rounds into the NVA's chest, killing him instantly. Stuckey then moves around the rock face, finds a narrow crevice, and squeezes into it, hidden from the enemy. Paul Harrison, slapping magazine after magazine into his rifle, fires at every charging enemy soldier he can see. When he runs out of ammunition, he jumps up from his foxhole and charges the NVA, using his M16 as a club, cracking a few heads before the blood-covered rifle slips from his hands. He then wades into the enemy with his fists until he falls dead from dozens of bullets. As North Vietnamese bursts through the elephant grass, Speranza opens up with his M16 on full automatic, tearing 3 of them apart. He manages to fire off a few more shots before RBG rounds, visible in their slow trajectory, plunge toward the mortar pit. 1 round slams in front of Speranza's foxhole, showering his back with shrapnel. Another explodes to his left, killing Doc Crocker instantly. The 3rd round sends shrapnel into Kirby's arms, head, and chest. The last round hits the rear lip of the mortar pit, tearing off Drubbin's right arm and mangling his left leg. He dies in a pool of blood. Gaines is killed with a bullet through his head. Johnson, the only gun crew member alive, takes shrapnel in the face but continues firing on the advancing enemy. As attackers fall, others jump over them, running toward Johnson, who keeps